All right, so expanding on what we covered last time where we were looking at creating or digitizing new features, now we're going to look at manipulating the attribute table using field calculations or geometric calculations. All right, so here's some of the features that we had digitized. I'm going to go back to our points feature, and I'm open the attribute table. Note that you also open attribute table by clicking up here. If you want to make edits, then you can do so, or sorry, calculations, you can click this button here, or you can basically click the button within the table. I generally just work within the table. So I'm going to do Open Field Calculator here, and that's going to allow us to do some field calculations. So there's two options at the top. You can either create a new field in which to do calculations or do your calculations in an existing field. And if you remember, we had created an X coord and a Y coord field, so we want to actually edit in or update an existing field. Note in create field, there's also an option of just doing a virtual field where it's not like saved permanently to the file. Okay, so we're going to try to update this X coord field. And what we want to put in there is the X coordinate of the point. So there's a bunch of operations available over here. So what we're going to look for is geometry. And then we see a bunch of options here for geometry. And then we want to calculate an X coordinate. So there's a couple options here. We have X at, so it retrieves the X coordinate of the current feature's geometry. X returns the X coordinate of a point geometry or the X coordinate of the centroid of a non-point feature. And then we have this $X, which returns the X coordinate of the current feature. So that makes the most sense for us since we just want the X coordinate for a point. So if I double click that, that adds that to the expression over here. And then if we click OK, it should generate that calculation for us. Note I added some additional points here also. Okay, so we have now the X coordinates, and since this is a in a UTM projection, this is effectively the easting. And then if say we wanted the Y coordinates, we would do the same thing, except now we want to change the or calculate the Y coordinate. And we're going to go down here again to geometry and find the measure that does the Y coordinate. So we'll do $Y and then execute that. And now we have our northing calculated there. Okay, so that's some examples for like geometric measurements. So let's look at this line feature next. I'm going to open up the line feature. So again, we had a description. We have a length. You can just type into these fields in here also when you're in editing mode. So that's another way to do manual tabulations and whatnot. So now we want to calculate something. So we're going to go into the field calculator. We again want to edit use an existing field. We want to do this kilometer field, and we want to do again geometry. So somewhere in here there should be something related to like length. So here we have length returns the number of characters in a string or the length of a geometry line string, and then we have $length returns the length of a line string. That's what we're after. And that wouldn't work for, as noting there, it won't work for a polygon feature. Okay, so I'm going to do length. My guess is it's going to do this in the map projection. Does it clearly say that? Okay, yeah, it's the current projections, ellipsoid settings, and distance settings. So that means it's going to calculate this in meters, but we would like to do it in square meters. So we're just going to do a multiply, and then we want to add in whatever the conversion factor is, which in this case is easy. I guess we can do divide. We'll do divide by 1,000. And then that should put us in kilometer units. Okay, let's hit OK and see what happens. There we go. So these are our lengths in kilometers. Roughly 4, roughly 2.5. Okay, let's say we want to convert that into like length in miles. So let's work that out. So I'm going to add another field. And this time we're going to work in a new field. So I'm going to create a new field, and we're going to call it length and miles. All right, so next we need a conversion factor. So we're going to go in, find that with Google. So we're going to do kilometers to miles. Probably should know that off the top of my head, but I do not. So 0.621. So now we're going to calculate the geometry. Or actually, we can calculate from the existing row as opposed to from the geometry. We have no. See if it was in the list there. So we'll just put it in, I believe it's in quotes. So we'll do, and this would help if I knew what it was. It was length. There it is. Length in kilometers. And then we're going to multiply that by the conversion factor, which is 0.621, and run it. Okay, and that returns it in length units. Just real quick, you could also do manipulations involving strings. So for example, I'm just going to go in here to, there should be options for like concatenating strings and whatnot. So here's string option, concat several strings to one, null, and then null values are converted to empty strings. Okay, so how we would use that then, let's say we wanted to take our description, and then we will concatenate with that the word, like a word. So we'll do option, I'm just going to put copy at the end. This is kind of a stupid example, but okay. And then we also need a blank space, right? So they don't run together. There we go. And then we can do, it's not letting us do it. Oh, we have to pick we have to name a field. So we're going to call this, we'll just call it descript2, and that's going to need to be written into a text field since it's text. So basically what that did was it just added the word copy to the end of that text string. You could also just put in a field like of something that's like a constant. So for example, we could put in blank into a text field. So we could create another field, we'll call it text3, and again we'll make it, let's see here, we'll make it a text, and then we'll set it equal to a string, so we're just going to put blank in there. And it should now return blank. And then again, we can do some additional manipulations. Let's again look underneath of our strings. So is there like an upper, lowercase, lower? So I wrote that all uppercase. So let's do a lower version. So we'll call this text4. Again, we'll set it equal to text, and then we will do lower of text3. So we should get back that. And maybe we could even wrap it in a concatenate to do even something more complicated. So we could like concatenate lower, and then we'll add to it blank, and then we'll just do copy again. It says something is invalid. Oh, this needs to be single quotes. That might be it. There we go. Oh, and then space there. and hit OK. So now we've converted it to lowercase, added copy to the end with the concatenation. All right, and then just as a one last example, we could just add like a constant value. So we'll do a whole number, and we'll call this num1, and we're going to save in there just the number 1. And that just puts 1 into all the values, or all the rows. Okay, and then lastly, let's look at this polygon. So we'll open up the attribute table for it. And now we want to, again, we have one field, but we'd like to maybe add in some other stuff. So I'm going to add in some more geometric information. So I'm going to create a field called X for centroid. Again, we'll make it real. And in there, we'll calculate the geometry. Receives X. So returns the X coordinate of a point geometry or the X coordinate of a centroid for a non-point geometry. So this is wanting us to feed it the geometry. Okay, so we would do, it looks like $ geometry would work. So that's basically feeding it into the geometry. Yep. Okay, and then we'll calculate that. And then we want to do, let's say, another one of those, but we'll do the Y cent. Again, we'll make it real. And we'll do, again, geometry. And then Y, and then the $ geometry. So that should calculate back the Y centroid. Okay. And then this is a polygon, so we can maybe calculate something like the area. So we're going to do that. So we'll do, I'm just going to call it square kilometers. And again, we'll make it a real number. And we want to, again, go to geometry and calculate the area. The area calculated by this function represents both the current and the area unit settings. Panometric. So we'll use this one. And then we'll take that area and we'll multiply it by something because it's going to give it back in square meters. So we want to do that, we want to convert that into square kilometers, or sorry, square meters to square kilometers. So 1 to the negative, I probably shouldn't do that off the top of my head, 1 e -6. There we go. And that should give us back the units in square kilometers. And last, you could also calculate a perimeter, which is basically the length around it. So we could call it perm1. Again, we'll use a real. And then we want to do geometry. And then there should be a perimeter option in here somewhere. And that's the perimeter. Okay, so those are some examples of doing just basic field calculations using QGIS.